Mom picked this obnoxiously expensive steakhouse for her birthday. Not because she particularly liked the food, but because it had valet parking and dim lighting that made her feel like a celebrity. She invited a mix of people, mostly the ones who'd praise her enough to make the evening worth her time. I wasn't really invited so much as expected. Same with the bill. I paid, like always. Quietly. No thanks. No offers to split. Just this unspoken rule that Jack handles it. I came a little late. Not on purpose, but I didn't rush either. When I walked in, they were already halfway through their appetizers. Becca glanced at her phone like I'd interrupted her. Dad didn't even look up. Mom gave me this lazy little wave, like I was the waiter. I sat down at the end of the table. There were about 12 people in total, some cousins, a few aunts, and 2 women I didn't recognize who were probably just there to fill seats and compliment Mom's new haircut. Dinner dragged. I mostly kept quiet and let them talk at each other. Becca talked about her wine review, side hustle like it was the next Netflix. She hadn't made a dime from it but acted like I should be proud. Dad kept making backhanded comments about how some of us work for a living, whenever I mentioned anything remotely successful. And Mom just smiled at everyone like she was holding court. Then came the toast. Dad stood up and clinked his glass. The room hushed. He smiled at Mom. At first I thought it'd be the usual. To my beautiful wife. Some inside joke from their college days, something syrupy and boring. But then he said it. To a new beginning. Starting today, we are no longer a family. For a second, I honestly thought it was some weird joke. Like he'd follow it with something lame about growing or evolving or whatever. He didn't. People actually started clapping. Not loudly, but just enough to make it real. My aunt even said, finally, under her breath. I looked at Mom. She didn't look shocked. Not confused. Just quiet. Like this had been planned. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. It came out before I could think. Not a full laugh, more like that stupid kind of giggle that slips when something snaps. Then I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the keys to the black SUV I bought them last year, and dropped them on the table. Then I guess you won't need this. That got their attention. Dad's smile froze. Mom's hand hovered midair over her wine glass. Becca just blinked. Then I opened my phone. Logged into the joint trust account I'd set up for all of them, the one that paid for their mortgage, Becca's apartment, credit cards they somehow maxed out every month, and closed it. Zeroed it out. Done. Their faces drained. It was quiet for the first time all evening. Becca finally spoke. That's it. I nodded. Yeah. That was it. She laughed. Not a haha funny laugh. More like she thought I was playing some sick joke and was waiting for the punchline. About 30 minutes later, she wasn't laughing. I found her near the back of the restaurant, behind one of those curtains they think hides drama. She was screaming into her phone, pacing, yanking at her hair. Then she turned on me, yelling that I couldn't do this, that I didn't understand what I was doing, that I was ruining everything. I didn't say anything. I just left her there. But that was only the start. That night was a line in the sand, and none of them realized just how far I'd already stepped over it. I didn't go home after the dinner. I checked into a hotel downtown and sat in the bar for a few hours with my phone on silent, watching sports I didn't care about. When I finally turned my phone back on, there were 17 missed calls. Becca called 8 times. Mom 4. The rest were from random numbers, probably relatives who suddenly remembered I existed now that the money was gone. The next morning, I drove to the house. Not theirs. Mine. The one I actually lived in and paid for. They hadn't stepped foot inside in over a year, not since I stopped hosting Thanksgiving because they'd bring Tupperware to steal leftovers. I made coffee and turned on the news. Nothing. Quiet. Peaceful. Then the doorbell rang. It was Aunt Tara. Full makeup, coat still buttoned, holding a box of pastries like this was some normal visit. She said she just wanted to talk, that she didn't want to pick sides, but people were calling her, and she needed to know what really happened. I let her in because I was curious how fast the narrative would shift. We sat at the kitchen table, and she told me everything. Apparently, Dad's announcement wasn't just a symbolic thing. They'd been planning it for weeks. He and Mom had told a few people already that they were cutting the cord with me. That I was toxic. That I'd been manipulating them financially and emotionally. They framed the toast like some bold act of reclaiming their independence. Except, they didn't expect me to call their bluff. They thought I'd laugh it off. Maybe storm out, make a scene. But they never thought I'd actually take the car back. Or shut down the money. They thought I needed them to keep playing this little game. And Tara said Mom called her crying around midnight. Not because I cut them off, but because she couldn't access one of her accounts to book a hotel for her post-birthday retreat. I'd forgotten I had that one under my name too. Oops. That would have been enough for most people. But not them. 2 days later, I got served at work. A formal notice. Mom and Dad were suing me for financial abuse of elderly dependents. I almost laughed in the HR office when I read it. The lawsuit said I'd coerced them into financial arrangements and used familial obligation to exert undue control over their resources. They framed everything, every loan, every car payment, every tuition check for Becca, as if I'd been blackmailing them. The lawyer they found must have been either desperate or completely unaware of who was really bankrolling them. The best part? Becca joined in. She sent an email to my office's general inbox claiming I'd harassed her. Attached screenshots of texts I'd sent, completely normal ones, like, "You left your charger here," as evidence. I guess she thought the more dramatic the story, the more likely someone would take her side. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't post anything. But I started collecting screenshots, bank statements, voice recordings, messages where Mom begged me for rent money and promised to pay me back once her writing career took off. Dad's drunk voicemails saying he needed help covering a second mortgage he secretly took out to buy Becca a condo. But the next surprise didn't come from me. It came from Lily, my cousin, the quiet one who always sat at the edge of the room during family stuff, scrolling through her phone. She posted a TikTok. Just her, sitting on her bed, talking about what financial abuse really looks like when your cousin gets scapegoated by his entire family after being their ATM for 10 years. It blew up. Like really blew up. 500,000 views in a day. She didn't name names, but people started piecing it together. Commenters found Becca's wine review channel and dragged her so hard she deleted half her videos. Within a week, the lawsuit was withdrawn. But Mom and Dad weren't done. They started visiting relatives. One by one. Not to apologize, but to poison the well. Saying I'd lost my mind, that I was cruel, vindictive. That I used money to punish love. But this time, people weren't buying it. And for the first time, the phone calls I got weren't demands. They were apologies. "I don't know what's gotten into your parents. I always thought something was off, but I didn't want to say anything. I'm ashamed I stayed quiet so long." That should have been enough for closure. But I wasn't done either. It was strange how quiet things got after the lawsuit was dropped. Like a storm that suddenly disappeared but left the whole town standing around waiting for the next crack of thunder. Mom and Dad didn't call. Becca went offline. For a minute, I almost thought they'd finally gotten the message. But I knew them. Silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. I didn't wait. The funny thing about people who pretend to be independent is they always forget how many strings they've allowed someone else to hold. I started small. Surgical. The SUV? Already towed and sold. But I didn't just take the money. I bought an old Honda with cash and had it delivered to their driveway with a bow and a card that said, "Let's see how free you really are." They didn't thank me. But they didn't send it back either. Then I canceled the family phone plan. Apparently, none of them knew how much of their lives were tied to that number. Becca lost access to all her social media accounts in one sweep. Mom couldn't get into her email. Dad missed 3 golf outings because nobody could get a hold of him. I waited 3 days, then sent a screenshot of a message Becca had posted 2 years ago begging me to help her set up her business line because she didn't understand contracts. Next came the mortgage. I'd co-signed it years ago because Dad's credit was a joke and Mom cried about losing the house her kids grew up in. I had a clause in the paperwork, a quiet one my lawyer suggested when I set it up. It said that if either party severed familial ties publicly, the agreement could be dissolved and repayment accelerated. It took less than 5 minutes to activate. Now they owed the bank a full payoff. In 30 days. That's when the real panic started. Mom called first. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail that started off calm, then cracked halfway through. Something about betrayal. I didn't care. Then came Dad. He showed up at my office. My assistant called and said some guy was downstairs yelling that I was destroying my own blood. I told her to call building security. When they escorted him out, he looked straight at the camera in the lobby and gave it the finger. I clipped that footage and texted it to him. New family photo. But the most satisfying part? Becca. She texted me from a number I didn't recognize. I can't log into anything. This isn't funny. I ignored it. Then she tried again. Please. I have brand deals depending on this. I sent her a link to the refund policy on a digital marketing course. No context. Just that. She didn't reply. They all went quiet again. Until Aunt Tara invited me to dinner. Just her, Lily, and a couple cousins. I said yes because I figured I owed them more than silence. When I showed up, I didn't expect what came next. They gave me a scrapbook. Old photos, stories, letters. Stuff I hadn't seen in years. Some of it was dumb, drawings I made in second grade, old birthday cards, but tucked in the middle were copies of emails. Screenshots of texts. Conversations my relatives had been having for years behind my back, warning each other about how entitled Mom had become, how Becca bragged about manipulating me. One email from Dad literally said, "Jack's our retirement plan." And they all signed a note at the end. Said they were sorry. Said they were ashamed. That they didn't say something sooner. It didn't fix things. But it gave me peace. Still, I had one last move. Not to destroy them. Just to make them feel it. I took all the bank records, all the transfer histories, all the receipts, and built a full report. Then I submitted it, anonymously, to the IRS. Let them explain how 3 unemployed adults lived in a $500,000 home, traveled twice a year, and claimed zero income. They wanted independence. They got it. And for the first time in years, I finally felt free. It had only been a few weeks since I had sent that neat little package to the IRS, but the ripples were beginning to show. Mom stopped posting on Facebook. That may not sound like much, but this woman used to go live when she watered her plants. Now? Radio silence. No cryptic quotes. No passive-aggressive jabs at ungrateful kids. Just gone. Dad tried to sell the golf clubs I bought him. I know because he listed them under a burner account on Craigslist, and my cousin James, who works in tech, traced the IP just for fun. We laughed for about an hour. But the real shock came one afternoon when Lily texted, "Are you free tonight? There's a meeting. It's time." I had no idea what she was talking about. As it turned out, my little act of rebellion had sparked something. It wasn't just my parents who treated family like a spigot of free money. Apparently, there were other relatives, distant ones I barely spoke to, who were doing the same thing. When I showed up at Lily's house, there were 10 people sitting in her living room. I recognized most of them. Cousin Rachel from New Jersey, who used to send me polite holiday cards until she went through a divorce and was suddenly cut off from the same people who once made her pay for family reunions. Uncle Mike, who hadn't spoken to my dad in years because Dad had, temporarily, borrowed $5,000 and never paid it back. And then there was Aunt Linda. I hadn't seen her in a decade. She stood up when I walked in and hugged me like I'd just come back from the war. "We've had enough," she said. "They're not just selfish. They're predators. And we're done pretending." The stories began to pour out. Apparently, after I cut off the money, Mom and Dad panicked so fast they started turning on everyone. They told one relative that Aunt Linda had stolen jewelry from Mom's house years ago, a lie, claimed that Uncle Mike was mentally unstable, and even tried to convince Lily's boss, who happens to be a mutual contact of Mom's, that Lily had been spreading family gossip online. She almost lost her job. They were unraveling. Not just desperate, but vindictive. Classic scorched earth tactics. Aunt Linda pulled out a folder. No joke. A whole folder. Inside? Screenshots. Voicemails. Copies of fake loan documents Dad once used in Grandpa's name back in the 90s. Stuff that could actually get them in some serious legal trouble. "Jack," she said, pushing the folder across the table, "we want you to help us burn them." It wasn't said in anger. It was surgical. Focused. They weren't interested in petty drama. They wanted justice. Exposure. And they needed someone who knew how to handle money, digital evidence, and wasn't afraid to go toe-to-toe with Mom and Dad. I didn't say yes right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to do it right. I spent the next few days combing through what they gave me, pulling records from public databases, dug through my own files. I hired a forensic accountant I used for one of my business audits and told her I needed a complete analysis of one family's financial fraud over the last 20 years. She didn't even blink. She said, "Who's the target?" I gave her the names. Her eyes widened. "Oh, them?" Apparently my parents had crossed paths with someone in her company years ago. Made enough of a stink that the name alone triggered recognition. She said she'd take it pro bono, just for fun. Things were falling into place. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was accountability. And I was going to deliver it with receipts, witnesses, and a chorus of relatives behind me ready to see Mom and Dad fall from the thrones they had built on lies and borrowed money. They wanted a war. Fine. I brought allies. It started with a letter. Not an email, not a text. A real, physical letter delivered to Mom and Dad's house from the IRS. Certified. Required a signature. Uncle Mike had a friend who worked in the mailroom and gave us the heads up. It arrived in their mailbox on a Thursday morning. By Thursday night, Mom had called half the family sobbing about a misunderstanding. No one returned her calls. Over the weekend, they tried to do damage control. I saw the posts. Mom logged on to an old Instagram account and posted a picture of a Bible verse and a sunset with the caption, "Those who judge will be judged in the end." Aunt Linda replied, "Start packing." But the real hits came from within. Cousin Rachel contacted the mortgage lender with copies of documents we found in that dusty old file. It turned out that Dad had listed 2 co-signers on an old refinancing form. Both were fake. One of them was Grandpa, who had been dead for 3 years at the time. The bank launched an investigation. Meanwhile, Lily took everything from her viral TikTok and expanded it into a YouTube documentary, 10 minutes of brutal honesty, complete with pixelated screenshots and carefully blurred voice messages. She didn't name names, but there was enough context for anyone in the family circle to see the truth. Within 48 hours, it had more than 1 million views. That was when things really started to fall apart. Dad's golf buddy? The one who clapped at the dinner toast? Turns out he was a co-owner of a side business Dad set up mostly as a tax dodge. After the video surfaced, he backed off. Cited public image concerns. Left Dad holding the bag with 2 years of back taxes and a sudden call from his accountant that, as Lily put it, ruined his 9th hole. Mom tried to throw Becca under the bus. She told relatives that the trust account was Becca's idea, and that she never wanted Jack's money, but went along with it for Becca's sake. Becca fired back with a 3-minute voice memo that she broadcast to every group chat she was still in, calling Mom a liar and claiming that she'd begged Becca to keep me on the hook. Now they weren't just isolated. They were turning on each other. Becca lost 2 brand sponsorships after followers started linking her to Lily's documentary. Her inbox was filled with angry messages, screenshots of her laughing at my dinner meltdown. One of her sponsors even demanded a refund of their last payment, citing reputational damage. She emailed me the contract. Said she needed help. I didn't respond. Then the estate hit. Uncle Mike, Aunt Linda, and I dug up Grandpa's original will never formally executed, but handwritten and witnessed. It stipulated that his life savings would be distributed equally if no one committed financial fraud after his death. A clause that was more of a moral line than a legal one. But now, with all the evidence, we had something concrete. We contacted the probate attorney, presented the forged refinancing documents, and the trust statements showing how Mom and Dad had diverted money under Grandpa's name. The attorney froze their share of the inheritance. Pending litigation. That's when the calls started again. Blocked numbers. Unknown. They tried Lily. Then Rachel. Even Aunt Linda. None of them picked up. But when Dad showed up at my building again, this time quietly, with a manila envelope in his hand, I realized it was almost over. He left it at the reception desk. No note. Just my name on the front. Inside? A handwritten apology. 5 pages. The last one wasn't even finished, just cut off in mid-sentence. But what got me was the check taped to it. $10,000. A refund of the last payment I made on her mortgage. No words. Just the money. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe fear. Maybe one last attempt to get ahead of the story before it spread any further. But it didn't matter. Because by then, the family had already spoken. And what they wanted was clear. It all came to a head one Sunday. Sunny, quiet, one of those deceptive afternoons when the world feels too peaceful for what's about to happen. And Linda was organizing a final family reunion. Not a party, not a reunion. Just a gathering in her backyard with a grill and a long table. Everyone was invited, including Mom, Dad, and Becca. She said it was time to stop whispering and finish what we started. To my surprise, they showed up. Becca wore sunglasses the whole time, like she was hiding from the paparazzi. Mom came overdressed as usual, like this was her comeback moment. Dad barely made eye contact with anyone. The silence when they arrived was thick enough to cut. Linda opened it straight. No performance. She told everyone what we'd discovered. The fraud. The lies. The years of manipulation. She passed around copies of the refinancing documents, the trust records, even screenshots of texts where Mom and Dad were coordinating stories about who deserved more of Grandpa's inheritance. Then Rachel stood up. Quietly, but clearly. She read aloud the names of every cousin, aunt, and uncle who had either loaned Mom and Dad money or been guilted into covering something. It took her 7 minutes to read them all. No one interrupted. Lily pulled out a flash drive and played a voicemail from Becca to a friend. In it, she said I was basically a doormat with a wallet, and that she was gonna cry when he finally cuts us off, but only until someone else pays the rent. Becca didn't even try to deny it. She just got up and walked to the back of the yard alone. And then came the last part. Mine. I didn't make a speech. I just stood up, looked at the people who raised me, and handed them an envelope. Inside were copies of documents I'd already sent to a legal service, formal statements severing all financial, legal, and personal ties. I'd written them 6 months ago. I just hadn't sent them. Now they were real. Mom opened hers, glanced at it, and asked if I was serious. Dad didn't say a word. Just stared at the table. Becca didn't come back. No one clapped. No one cheered. But the air shifted. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't alone. Then Aunt Linda announced the real surprise. She was taking over Grandpa's house. Turns out she'd been quietly working with the estate attorney for months. With the fraud exposed, the assets were being redistributed. Instead of letting it rot or selling it, she decided to turn it into something useful. A family trust. But this time with rules. Real ones. Only relatives who contributed financially, emotionally, to caregiving could benefit. It wasn't about money. It was about values. Boundaries. Respect. The people who cared. Mom and Dad didn't qualify. Neither was Becca. When everyone got up to eat, to talk, to reconnect, Mom sat frozen, envelope in hand. Dad walked out. Didn't say goodbye. Just slipped through the gate like someone who knew it was over. Becca left a few minutes later. Didn't say a word. I doubt she ever will. And me? I stayed till the end. Helped clean up. Told stories I hadn't told in years. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, relief. Not because I had won. But because the game was finally over. We didn't just get revenge. We got our family back.